So in Learning Objective 6, we're going to try to understand what is going to shift the supply curve. So we've developed the supply curve. We understand why it's upward sloping. We understand it as a marginal cost curve for the firm. And we've been able to take individual supply curves, add them up to get market supply. So now, much like we did with demand, I want to understand what's going to cause the curve to shift and also to distinguish between shifts in the curve and movements along the curve. So with respect to my last point, let's draw out exactly a shift versus a movement along. So if you follow the link there in the slides, and you click on the graph little button over here, that will take you to the end, and it'll give you a much better looking picture probably than the one that I will draw. But I will do my best nonetheless here. So if I draw out a supply curve, quantity on the horizontal axis, the price on the vertical axis. Supply is upward sloping. So a shift of the supply curve is going to mean that at every price, I want to supply more or less. So let's take price 1 here. A shift to the right, or an increase in supply, means at this price, I want to supply more. So this, call it S2, is a shift right or an increase in supply. I'll use both terms to describe that shift to the right, an increase in supply. So that's at every price I'm willing to supply more. Another way to go is if at every price I want to supply less. That would be a decrease in supply or a shift to the left. So we'll call that S3. Shift left or a decrease in supply. Okay, so the curve is moving. Now, one thing that will help you to understand this and also to know whether a particular change will affect the supply curve is to remember that intuition we developed, that the supply curve is the marginal cost curve. So supply is exactly the same thing as marginal cost. So if the supply curve shifts to the right, it means that the marginal cost of producing that amount of goods has gone down. So supply increase implies that the marginal cost has gone down. So whatever might cause that marginal cost to go down will shift the supply curve to the right. If supply goes down, it means that the marginal cost to produce a quantity has increased. So when I think about is something going to shift the supply curve and which way, I want to think of how is that going to affect the marginal cost of producing another unit, right? So in the decrease in the marginal cost, you see us going down when the supply curve shifts right, and when the supply curve shifts left, you see the marginal cost going up. So that intuition, I think, will help you piece together what shifts the supply curve and in which direction. Okay, now, here's 5 different changes, and we want to sort out whether each of these changes will A, shift the supply curve or move along it, and then B, in which direction is the shift going to go. So these are here, look through them, give them a try, right? So what do you think is going to happen to the supply curve and in which direction? Most of them are fairly intuitive. Now, on the next slide, I've kind of broken these down into groups. Changes in the price of inputs, changes in technology, number of sellers, and changes in our beliefs about the future. So I'm going to switch to another document to kind of take each of these items in turn to understand how they shift the supply curve. So we will start with the first one, the cost of LCD screens increases. Cost of LCD screens increases. So what this means is that, when you build up, most of you have a smartphone, and the screen on the front is glass. So it's an LCD screen. So you put this screen on there, and that's how we interact with the phone. So that's a component to what we're doing, to what we're producing, right? That's an input to production. So if the inputs to the phone get more expensive, the marginal cost is going to increase. Marginal cost increases, and that's a decrease in supply. Right? So the supply of smartphones is going to shift to the left. A decrease in supply is a result of an increase in the inputs of production. Very similarly, other things that would cause this. So, that is a material or an intermediate good used in the production. But other resources, so a great example would be the cost of labor. Right? So as the cost of labor increases, that increases the marginal cost of producing goods. That is going to shift the supply curve to the left. So if I am, let's say Foxconn, right? So that's a hot topic in Wisconsin. So let's say that they did put their plant for making LCD screens in Wisconsin, and something happened that caused the wage that they had to pay to increase. The wage goes up, that's going to decrease supply of smartphones because the marginal cost of making LCD screens has gone up. Okay, so the next item that was on there was the invention of a new computer chip that's much faster. Now, what I'm really kind of getting at here is that this is going to make it faster or easier to produce smartphones. Right? So I'm really thinking more generally in terms of any technological innovation that would make it easier to make a smartphone or less costly to make a smartphone. Right? So these are technological innovations that always happen over time in industries, right? We develop better processes, better machines, smarter machines, machines with better computer chips, like in this example, that can put the production together faster and cheaper. And that, as a result, is going to reduce the marginal cost. So supply is going to increase. So there we go. So we've handled the first two of those. In the next video, we'll walk through the remaining things that shift the supply curve, and then we'll ultimately be able to piece this together.